What's happening, Raider Nation? I hope you're sitting down because what I'm about to tell you is gonna shake the very foundation of everything you thought you knew about this silver and black franchise. We're talking about moves that could completely redefine the trajectory of this season, decisions that are sending shockwaves through the organization, and moments that prove this team is operating on a level that most people simply aren't prepared to understand. And today we've got updates that are gonna grip your football soul and refuse to let go. A sudden roster decision that's left everyone asking questions and demanding answers. A contract situation that's putting one of our most loyal players in an impossible position while the market explodes around him. And a rising force who's been quietly building momentum and is now ready to explode onto the scene in ways that could change everything we know about this offense. If you bleed silver and black, smash that subscribe button. Drop your like and let me know in the comments. Because we need to show the entire NFL that Raider Nation dominates every corner of the internet, just like we're about to dominate every corner of that field. If you think you've heard it all about what's happening in Las Vegas, think again. Because what's unfolding inside this organization right now could completely rewrite the script of not just this season, but the entire future of this franchise. And I'm about to take you behind the scenes of decisions that are making players, coaches, and front office executives question everything they thought they knew about building a championship team. The first story hits like a sledgehammer to the chest, and it centers around a player who was supposed to be a cornerstone of this defense. Christian Wilkins! Remember that name, because what happened to him is the kind of story that makes you realize just how quickly everything can change in this league. This man was brought to Las Vegas with expectations that reached the ceiling, a defensive tackle who was supposed to anchor this front seven and terrorize opposing quarterbacks for years to come. But sometimes, Raider Nation, the NFL has a way of throwing curveballs that nobody sees coming. Wilkins came to the Raiders carrying the weight of massive expectations. A former first-round pick who had proven himself in Miami, accumulating 22.5 sacks, 45 tackles for loss, and 56 quarterback hits across 86 career games. These aren't just numbers on a stat sheet. These are the building blocks of a dominant defensive presence. When the Raiders made their move for Wilkins, they weren't just acquiring a player. They were making a statement about the kind of defense they intended to build. But then reality hit with the force of a freight train. Wilkins appeared in only 5 games last season before a season-ending foot injury derailed everything. And we're not talking about some minor setback that heals with a few weeks of rest. This was the kind of injury that changes trajectories, the kind that makes organizations question their long-term plans. Throughout the entire offseason, Wilkins remained sidelined, with head coach Pete Carroll describing his rehabilitation process as challenging. And when a coach like Carroll calls something challenging, you know we're dealing with serious complications. The writing was already on the wall, but what happened next sent shockwaves through the entire organization. The Raiders made the decision to release Wilkins, and initially the narrative seemed straightforward. They simply didn't see a clear path forward for his return from injury. It was the kind of business decision that, while painful, makes sense in the cold, calculating world of NFL roster management. But then ESPN's Adam Schefter dropped a report that changed everything. According to Schefter's reporting, there was an incident where Wilkins playfully went to kiss a teammate on top of his head, and that teammate objected and filed a report with the club's HR department. Suddenly, what seemed like a simple injury-related release became something much more complex, much more layered. When Pete Carroll was asked about this report during his Tuesday press conference, his response was telling in its brevity. Really, I don't. I have no comment to make. We made a decision on what we're doing and we're moving with it. We'll see how that all unveils itself in time. That silence speaks volumes. Raider Nation. In a league where coaches usually have something to say about everything, Carroll's refusal to elaborate tells us that there are layers to this story that we may never fully understand. What we do know is that a player who was supposed to be a foundational piece of this defense is now gone, leaving a void that this organization will need to address moving forward. But just when it seemed like this was the biggest headline shaking the Raiders organization, another story began to rise from the depths of contract negotiations and market dynamics. And trust me, you're not ready for the financial earthquake that's about to reshape everything you thought you knew about this team's salary cap situation. The second wave of chaos hitting the Raiders comes in the form of market forces that are completely beyond their control, but are threatening to tear apart one of the most important relationships in the entire organization. We're talking about Kolton Miller, the longest tenured Raider, a man who has bled silver and black longer than almost anyone currently on this roster. Miller isn't just another player, he's become a symbol of consistency and loyalty in an organization that has seen more turnover than a revolving door. But sometimes, loyalty isn't enough to protect you from the brutal economics of professional football. And what happened this past Sunday sent shockwaves through every front office in the NFL, including the one in Las Vegas. The Los Angeles Chargers, yes, our division rivals, signed offensive tackle Rashawn Slater to a contract extension that didn't just reset the market, it obliterated it and built something entirely new on top of the rubble. Slater's deal? 4 years, $140 million with $92 million guaranteed. According to Adam Schefter, this makes Slater the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history. Let me repeat that. The highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history. And he's playing in our division, which means the Raiders are going to have to face this generational talent twice a year for the next 4 seasons. The numbers behind Slater's contract aren't just impressive, they're terrifying for every other team trying to retain their own offensive line talent. Slater has been absolutely dominant since being selected in the first round of the 2021 NFL Draft. According to Pro Football Focus, he was the second best offensive tackle in the entire NFL with a 90.9 grade. He allowed only 26 pressures and 3 sacks all season, and 2 of those sacks came in the same game. When the Raiders faced the Chargers in Week 1 last season, Slater didn't allow a single pressure, not one. Now imagine being Kolton Miller and watching your division rival get paid like he just won the lottery, while you're sitting in the final year of your current contract, desperately wanting to remain with the organization you've called home longer than anyone else. Miller has been seeking a new deal for quite some time, and there has been radio silence from the Raiders front office. No noise about extension talks, no indication that negotiations are even beginning. The cruel irony is that Miller has developed into one of the league's most underrated linemen. He's been the steady, reliable presence protecting the quarterback's blind side. The kind of player who doesn't always make highlight reels, but makes every other player on the offense better by simply doing his job at an elite level. But being underrated doesn't pay the bills, and it certainly doesn't provide the security that comes with a long-term contract extension. Here's the brutal truth, Miller won't get a deal like Slater's, and honestly, he shouldn't. Not because he's not valuable, but because Slater is operating on a different level entirely. But Miller deserves recognition for what he's brought to this organization, and he deserves a contract that reflects his importance to the team's future. A fair deal for Miller would be somewhere around 4 years and $76 million with $51 million guaranteed. Enough to make him the 6th highest guaranteed money among left tackles. Enough to show that the Raiders value what he brings to the table. The question that's keeping Raiders executives awake at night is simple. Can they afford to let Miller walk? He's been the anchor of this offensive line, the constant in a sea of changes. Losing him would create a domino effect that could destabilize the entire offensive structure. But in a league where the salary cap is unforgiving and every dollar matters, tough decisions have to be made. And just as the contract negotiations and roster moves were dominating headlines, something else was quietly building momentum in the background. Something that could shift the entire narrative of this team's offensive potential. Because while everyone was focused on the drama and the dollars, another presence was preparing to announce himself in a way that nobody saw coming. But hang on, Raider Nation, because what's coming next might just flip everything upside down and prove that sometimes the most important stories are the ones that develop away from the spotlight in the grinding work of training camp, where futures are forged and legends are born. The third story is where everything comes together, where all the pieces of this complex puzzle finally click into place and reveal a picture that's going to make every Raiders fan's heart race with anticipation. Because while the organization was dealing with unexpected departures and contract complications, something beautiful was happening on the practice fields of Las Vegas. Someone was quietly putting together performances that had coaches whispering in excitement and veterans nodding in approval. That someone is Trey Tucker, and what he's been doing in training camp isn't just impressive, it's the kind of breakout performance that changes the entire trajectory of a player's career and potentially an entire offensive ceiling. Remember, Tucker came into this season with everything to prove and everything to lose. The Raiders have been investing premium draft capital at offensive skill positions, bringing in young talent that threaten to push out players who were once considered part of the future. Tucker, a 2023 draft pick, found himself in that dangerous middle ground. Not established enough to feel secure, but too invested in to simply discard. He needed more than just a good offseason. He needed to prove that he belonged not just on the roster, but in the starting lineup. And prove that he has, in the most spectacular fashion possible. Over the past few days of training camp, Tucker has emerged as one of the Raiders' most dynamic playmakers. We're not talking about a few good catches or some solid route running. We're talking about the kind of consistent, explosive performance that makes quarterbacks start looking for you first, and defensive coordinators start having nightmares about your route combinations. The breakthrough moments came during Friday and Sunday's practices, performances that had everyone in the organization taking notice. According to The Athletic's Tashan Reed, quarterback Geno Smith connected with Tucker for touchdowns in back-to-back practices. Back-to-back. That's not luck, that's not coincidence. That's a player who has found another gear and is operating at a level that demands respect. This is exactly what Tucker needed to separate himself from the pack. With Jacoby Myers looking set as the top receiver on the depth chart and rookies Jack Beck and Dante Thornton Jr. having strong off seasons as well, the competition for playing time was fierce. Tucker could have easily gotten lost in the shuffle, could have been relegated to special teams duty or worse. Instead, he's forcing his way into the first team offense and making it impossible for coaches to ignore his impact. The numbers from Tucker's first 2 NFL seasons tell a story of potential that was never fully realized. 66 catches for 870 yards and 5 touchdowns. Decent numbers, but not the kind that make you feel secure about your future in this league. Some of those struggles can be attributed to questionable quarterback play, a reality that every skill position player on the Raiders has had to deal with in recent years. But excuses don't pay bills or guarantee roster spots, and Tucker knew he needed to elevate his game to survive. What's happening now is the culmination of a player who refused to accept mediocrity, who took the criticism and the uncertainty and turned it into fuel for improvement. Tucker showed significant improvement last season, and that momentum is now exploding into the kind of training camp performance that turns heads and changes depth charts. The implications of Tucker's rise extend far beyond just one player's success story. If he continues this upward trajectory, the Raiders could transform from having one of the more questionable receiving rooms in the league to having one of the deepest and most dangerous offensive attacks in the entire NFL. Suddenly, opposing defenses can't just focus on stopping Myers or containing the tight end position. They have to account for Tucker's speed, his route running precision, and his growing chemistry with the quarterback. This is how championships are built, Raider Nation. Not just through big name acquisitions or flashy draft picks, but through players like Tucker who refuse to be overlooked, who grind in the shadows until they're ready to step into the spotlight and prove that they belong among the elite. The beauty of Tucker's story is that it represents everything this organization has been trying to build: resilience, determination, and the refusal to accept limitations. While other stories dominate the headlines with drama and complications, Tucker has been writing his own narrative through pure performance and unwavering dedication to his craft. And that player, Tucker, was the one no one expected to dominate headlines entering this training camp. But now, he's the one they can't stop talking about. He's the one making defensive coordinators around the AFC West lose sleep. He's the one proving that sometimes the most important acquisitions aren't the ones you make in free agency or the draft room. They're the ones you develop through patience, coaching, and an unwavering belief in a player's potential. So here's where we stand, Raider Nation. An organization that's dealing with unexpected departures, navigating complex contract negotiations, and discovering hidden gems that could transform the entire offensive philosophy. The question isn't whether this team has the talent to make a serious run. The question is whether the rest of the NFL is ready for what happens when all these pieces come together on the field. The Christian Wilkins situation reminds us that in the NFL, nothing is ever guaranteed. And sometimes the most promising situations can change in an instant. The Colton Miller contract standoff shows us the harsh realities of a salary cap league, where loyalty and production don't always translate to financial security. But Tucker's emergence proves that sometimes, when you least expect it, a player can step up and change everything. If this fired you up, don't forget to smash that like button, drop your boldest take in the comments, and subscribe because we're just getting started. This Raider Nation story, filled with unexpected twists, financial drama, and breakthrough performances, is just the beginning of what promises to be the most interesting season in Las Vegas Raiders history. Because this is just getting started.